Just start recording. All right, so welcome everybody to the Clearbanc webinar. So it's Clearbanc, brought to you by Tanya's Bookkeepers Bootcamp, hosted by myself, Tanya Hiltz. For those of you who don't know me, I am a certified professional bookkeeper and the founder of Cloud Bookkeeping Services and Tanya's Bookkeepers Bootcamp. A little bit about myself and my accolades. I'm not going to go into this too much. Oh, sorry, can we silence the phones after? Sorry, I forgot to put the phones on Do Not Disturb. Anyway, so just a couple of accolades. Again, you guys can read through these yourselves, but the ones that I am definitely more proud of or recent is I was honored with receiving the 2019 Professional Leader of the Year through the Institute of Professional Bookkeepers of Canada, and that's actually the first year. It's a brand new one that they brought out. They replaced one, and so that
Awesome.
that was huge. The Bookkeepers Bootcamp qualified for continuing education credits from the IPBC in 2018, and we were the first and only member-run program that actually acknowledges the continuing education credits as an ongoing basis, which is pretty cool. And of course, we're Intuit Global Firm of the Future for 2018, the Canadian runner-up for 2017, and found one of Practice Technician's top 50 women in accounting globally for 2018. So those are the most recent ones.
Unreal.
So yeah. So it's pretty big, but that also means that there's big shoes to fill, right? So
Totally.
Let me keep it up.
Totally.
But anyway, yeah, and of course it's only because of my peers, really. So, but that's
Love
awesome. All right, so, and that was it. I had one other page. Where did it go? I had an introduction page for you guys. Like technology.
Either way, that works for me.
And I just updated it with the logo too. So I'm so sorry about that. I don't know where it went to. I did it like literally just before we joined. So I don't know where it went to. It's not there. So my apologies. But okay, so I will stop sharing and we will let Rourke take over and we can learn all about Clearbanc and how that can help us help our clients.
Awesome. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay,
great
Thank
introduction.
you, Rourke. Thank you.
But honestly, and if you have questions as well, or you want to keep this in a very discussion style, I'm very I'm not the most professional of people, but I like what I do. So, if you have questions, I'll keep it very open and we can go from there. So, I am excited to introduce this. I've been talking with Tanya for a little bit now. For a little bit of context, I work at Clearbanc. These are kind of our taglines, and the core focus of this, though, is not necessarily about Clearbanc itself. It's more about what options are available for e-commerce and SaaS companies in specific. The reason why I'm speaking to those companies in specific is because that's where my background is, and the funding landscape available. The reason why I'm also speaking about them is because the funding options and the funding landscape for them is very different than the traditional space. Oftentimes banks don't support them. They have a very different business case than a lot of the traditional companies that are out there, and therefore they just need to different services, different support. They need the cloud, they need other things like that, and so there's obviously financing to support that. And so I come into the picture. I joined Clearbanc actually 6 months ago. I'll do a little background on me. I've led a few partnerships here. Specifically, we work within the Canada, US, UK, and Australia. And what I really get passionate about is I've had 2 businesses in my past, and I know it's very difficult to connect with different kind of services that really support your company to grow and scale. And that's why I'm here. It's really to help the companies that we work with connect with different accounting firms or consultants that can really help them grow and scale. And so before this, I had a music-based company in Montreal and an HR company in Toronto. Well, here I am at Clearbanc, hanging out with dogs, drinking coffee, and dancing around. And I think there's a key thing to just keep in mind as we go through this, and this is kind of just Clearbanc's tagline. And so I want to, if you're thinking about, throughout this presentation, one thing to keep in mind is what would you do with an unlimited marketing budget? And that's something that you can talk to your customers about, is especially in e-commerce and SaaS, marketing is such a big part of your business, but sometimes you don't have the cash flow to support it. And so what Clearbanc is here for is we're trying to untap that lock on that cash flow in a responsible way. so that they can have an unlimited marketing budget scaling out. So, you know, it's not easy to get financing or funding, especially in this new economy, right, for e-commerce and SaaS. You know, there's a lot of risk if you're going to a bank where you have to like tie up a personal guarantee, put down like your house or your kid, you know, all that, you know, and the process is like really long. You know, oftentimes if you've had an e-commerce business or you worked with an e-commerce business in the past, and you're you know, talking to them about how they got funding, they would definitely know that the process takes forever and they just don't understand the unit economics associated with it. And on the other side, you have actually like VC, which is a very hot topic now. And, you know, equity plays a large part in terms of how companies can grow and scale, but it's very expensive. And so it's not necessarily the solution that, you know, everyone should use all the time for their growth. So, you know, there's banks which have like long cycles and a long process and sometimes don't fit what your needs are for short-term cash flow. And then there's VC where it's very expensive long-term and also takes a long time. So, and it's very, both of these systems are actually very like elite in practice, right? When you're going to a venture capital firm, it's very much about who you know. When you're going to a bank, it's oftentimes those qualitative things about yourself. You know, men are much more likely to get funded than women, or, you know, what socioeconomic background you come from is much more likely to predict if they're going to give you financing for your business or not, and not actually based on how is your business actually doing, right? And so a lot of people that we talk with at Clearbanc are frustrated because, you know, they came from a different background that didn't support having a good credit rating, but they have a strong business. And because they don't have a good credit rating or a good background, and they come from a different socioeconomic area, they're a lot, their terms are a lot worse than the people who just have a better, you know, silver platter giving, right? And so we're trying to build this world where, you know, raising money is really easy. Like if you want to grow your business, it should be easy for you to connect and figure out, can I get capital to grow this? That process should be, you know, transparent and like quick to do. You know, you don't have to give away parts of your company because it's your company, right? Like everyone goes into business with an idea that like it's very close to them. You don't want to be giving it away to someone who's just giving you money to help you grow it, because they're not nearly as invested in it as you are. And so we want to, you know, build a world where people don't have to give away their companies to grow it out. You know, collateral is like such a hard thing, because as a business, you know, you need capital, but when you go home and you're trying to sleep at night and you know that if your business doesn't succeed, that you lose your house, it's like not necessarily the most best thing for your mental health. And you know, it's also you're risking your long-term possibilities in terms of like credit score and everything else. So this is a world that we're trying to build. Our story is, you know, we were started by Michelle Romano and Andrew D'Souza. Michelle had e-commerce business in the past, and she joined Dragon's Den, which is Canada's kind of version of Shark Tank, was giving out, you know, making these deals with these e-commerce companies with really great businesses, but they were taking equity stakes in the company. And those investments were being purely done. You know, 80% of that money was being used for their marketing or their inventory or these scalable things that have a very linear relationship with the company's growth. And if you looked at that the long term, that meant that it was really not like a sustainable thing for the business. They're really not winning in this deal. You know, so she, you know, being as well kind of, you know, I'm going to say screwed over by PayPal in the past. She wanted to build a company that didn't hurt a company because they're taking the risk and they're, you know, going out of their way to really, you know, change the economy for the better, right? So we've invested in, the numbers here at the bottom are a little bit delayed here. We've actually invested in 2,300 companies. We do a very data-driven approach. And because of our data-driven approach, we're trying to break down the barriers. We've invested in 8 times more founders than the traditional VC. We've invested actually now in every state in the States, almost every province in Canada, and we've now broken into UK and Australia. But that's kind of enough about Clearbanc. I really want to go into Yes.
Sorry, Rourke, do you just mind? I just want to throw a little bit of trivia here, which is something that we were just
Yeah.
talking about last week with my husband. But
Yeah.
it's funny you say that Dragon's Den is Canada's equivalent to Shark Tank. Shark Tank's been around about 5 years longer than Dragon's Den was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not a lot of people are really aware that their Shark Tank is really big, but Dragon's Den was the first. Just thought that was interesting.
Dragon's Den was the first, and she and Michelle joined around like 4 years ago, and
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing that if you actually look at the schedules, they I'm not sure how transparent this is, but they do almost all of their filming in 2 months. I
Yes.
think it's July and August, and so they do 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, pretty much through July and August, and so she can't be in the office. So and the other months where she's actually in the office, so she's always working, right? But she has to do extra work because she knows she's not going to be there for the next 2 months. So
Catch up.
it's really
Exactly.
motivating to it's motivating to work with both these people. Like Michelle is an absolute powerhouse. She's phenomenal, so smart, like knows exactly about business and everything that we're doing. So really setting the vision forward. And Andrew's just like amazing thinker, thinking strategic. It's a great company to be a part of.
And that's awesome. And I mean, I don't know anything about Andrew, you know, other than what you said, but I do know that Michelle, I mean, I've watched every episode of Dragon's Den, and
Yeah,
I love it when I see them that they actually care. And you really feel that
totally.
from her, that she really cares about them. And of course, I got to meet her in person a few years ago in Vancouver, and that was just
Yeah.
absolutely awesome. I was quite tongue tied around her. I don't think we had more than a couple of a couple of sentences back and forth, really, because I was just like so
Totally.
starstruck. But I've got a selfie with us to prove it happened.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, honestly, I'm still tongue tied every now and then because I know how much she does and what she does, but no, and she does really care, right? Like she actually engages with some of our investments here and talks to some of the companies that we funded in case studies. And both Andrew is himself invested in multiple companies. And so what he finds extremely exciting about this is this opportunity that we can actually empower a new generation of companies to grow and scale and actually shift the balance of power away from these traditional institutions that are so biased in terms of their investing. And he's curious about what world can we build where we're actually investing in companies based on their business and not based on the person behind it.
Well, and that's awesome because that ties into the new, you know, the new bookkeeping or new accounting. Now that we're dealing with the cloud-based accounting, we're
Yeah.
working in real time, which is empowering us to be able to have those conversations and be more of an advisory and business coach and business advisory to actually help our clients, you know,
Yeah.
change their future instead of just giving them reports of stuff that happened, you know, 90 days ago, which does them no good. And that's a lot of what we're doing. And this is great how it all ties in beautifully to, you know, what
Yeah.
most of us are already on the road to. So that's awesome.
Yeah, we're both leveraging like new technologies, right? And these new technologies enable business owners, right, to get a better, opportunities that usually were, blockaded by a lot of capital or a lot of, context and stuff like that. And these are kind of opening up. And so now there's it's just much easier to get a business going. It's still very hard. Like starting the business is very hard, but there is a lot of options available now. And honestly, there's so many options, that it's sometimes difficult to know where to go. And so I'll go into, I know that I have a few things here. So I wanted to start off actually with the equity portion. So like equity is like been a very hot topic. Call it adventure capital here, because really like if you're taking equity, you're going on an adventure. Like you're getting a lot of money in one go. And you're investing it into really scale and grow the company, right? And it's on forefront of a lot of people's mind just based on like media nowadays. So like, what is it actually? You're giving away a percentage of your company, right? And I'm now talking to accountants, so you guys completely understand this perspective, right? But what companies, like if you look at the investment of an Uber, if you give 100K, it's worth 4.5 mil from the difference between the Series B to today, right? And if they're investing this 100K into scalable things that only give the company, 200K worth of value, should that the person who gave that money be, should they have 4.5 mil based on their initial investment? If Uber only got an extra 200K out of it, and the answer is no, right? I mean, what equity is extremely good for is for extremely technical risk. So things that you don't know how it's going to relate to your company. You know, international expansion is a great one, or investing into a really new, interesting tech or a new product. These are things that can have very strong step function growth for your company. But you know, if you're putting in inventory, that's not step function growth, that's very linear growth, right? And so you want to use the equity dollars. Companies want to use their equity dollars to really look at like these step function things. You know, we work with a lot of companies. We get to watch them grow and scale. We can actually help with the introduction to equity companies as well. So we're not against equity in any way as a company. We know it's a super valuable thing. And you know, you shouldn't be taking debt for these extremely technical risks, because then, you know, you're putting your house for a very, very, you know, putting your house down maybe for like a very risky endeavor, right? Which could pay off big, but you know, like that leads to a lot of sleepless nights. So equity is really good for that technical risk, because you don't really lose anything on the back end. You can gain a lot of opportunity out of it, but it's very expensive because you're giving away a part of your company. And this translates actually to debt, right? So you don't want to do super technical risk things on your debt, because you're putting down your house, right? So over time, you end up paying more on your debt. As you guys know, I mean, I'm talking to people who, you know, probably know much more about the accounting backend than myself. But the key thing here is that payments are fixed. So you're looking, this is really good. Debt is an extremely, you know, useful vehicle when the company is thinking about their, you know, new manufacturing, you know, equipment, where they can kind of, you're amortizing, right, the cost of that equipment over time. You know, you're going to get a fixed amount of growth as it scales out. And so you can kind of just bake that into that investment and be like, okay, we can handle these fixed interest payments until, you know, until the end of this paid off, right? And that's where kind of debt's really valuable. But debt usually has a you know, longer payback cycle, right? You know, companies are usually, if you're a financial institution, you're usually investing it for 2 years, 3 years payback, right? Or longer. So this doesn't really work for those short-term turnarounds. It doesn't really like fit as well, because the payback cycle, you might not be getting all your money back, or you might be paying more than you're making back in the short cycle. So then venture debt is a very similar thing. It's like, you know, when you're scaling up your company, you want like a large amount of capital to bridge yourself into the next area. So here's some of the key things to be aware of. I'm not sure why we have this supreme money thing, but when you're looking at venture debt, there's like lower fees usually, and the capital is kind of rolling, but there's a lot of warrants and clauses. So it's you know, certain things can happen that trigger the impact of like the debt being worth 3 times more than it originally was, and now the company has to pay back a lot more. Or if you don't hit a certain growth threshold, the company, the financial provider might want to recoup all of their losses before that growth trajectory happens, and they can pull that back. So venture debt can be very risky if you don't hit the warrants and clauses that they set out for your growth trajectory. What it often means as well is that you're now pressured to not necessarily do what's best for the business, but actually what's best for the person who provided that venture debt, which can actually hurt you very much so long term. And if you don't end up hitting that number, then or maybe even if you do, you know, your business will end up folding. So these are extra slides on that. I kind of want to go into, so debt, right? That's when you're securing an asset. It does come with a personal guarantee, but your payments are fixed. So you do know how much you're paying back on those payment rates. And if you're securing a long-term asset that has a relationship to these fixed payments, then it can be a very good vehicle for you to grow the business, or for the company to grow the business. But as well, there's compound interest rates. So it's more risky if you're not able to pay it back, and you know, it comes with a personal guarantee. this kind of translates. So the two things that I talked about, or three key things, right, were debt. So debt and venture debt being very similar, just slightly different vehicles, where venture debt has lots of warrants and clauses in terms of the company's growth. And then debt, which it's just association with like compound interest rates and like a more longer term payment. On top of this, the third thing was equity. So like that's another kind of long-term vehicle, and that's really good cash injection, but it's very expensive. And you know, it's not really great for that short-term linear growth stuff. So what a lot of e-commerce and SaaS companies do now, because their growth is very dependent on like marketing or inventory, they'll use credit cards, and they'll just bootstrap and juggle credit cards to actually just, you know, get the inventory for the next month, and then when they get that capital back, they'll pay off that credit card. And as they scale, you know, it's not necessarily actually the best approach, because what you're doing is you need to buy more inventory, which means you need more credit cards that you need to juggle more, right? And it becomes very operationally hard. And if you don't actually get the recoup on that month back from when you invest in that credit card, or when you put the capital on your credit, and you don't get the capital back right away like you expected, then you know, you're in a situation where that compound interest rate is really kicking in, and the company will be like losing a lot more. So that's the main like problem with credit cards. Now, the important thing to note is that credit cards and other types of like bootstrapping investment for short term, so specifically like growth capital, is really relevant for e-commerce and SaaS companies, because the space is like virtual, right? They're competing in a market that's very much so global, and therefore it's lots of competition, right? You're facing companies across the world all the time. You know, you could be a company based in Ottawa or Toronto, and you could have another company in Chicago. Their actual customer bases are going to be very much the same, right? You can ship almost anywhere. You know, you can market to anyone. So who actually wins in this market, right? It's oftentimes the one who has the stronger branding and the one that's actually able to pull in the customers and get the like brand recognition to be like, okay, this is the company that I go to. So what happens is you'll have a traditional growth path, right? You get capital for inventory. You know, you're growing your business in a very like bootstrapped way, where you're just, you know, with the money that you make on your purchase of inventory, you reinvest that into more marketing and more inventory, right? And then you wait for that cycle to come back, and you reinvest back into more marketing and more inventory. And you'll have a very slight curve of growth, and that's a great way to grow business. But the problem is that you're competing in a space where other companies are actually going for capital solutions to help untap their growth, right? The North American market is very competitive in the sense that people want to build big businesses here. And so if you're going through this very bootstrapped, you know, reinvesting the profits, as a company, right, is reinvesting the profits back into their business, but another company is taking capital to increase their growth trajectory, their growth curve will be significantly greater over a year, 2-year, 3-year time span. And so it becomes very important for a business to recognize how that growth capital investment actually changed the trajectory of the competition or of themselves, and puts them in a better position in the long term, right? And so it becomes almost a situation where capital is almost needed to help you grow your business against the market that is there, right? And so now you're thinking about, okay, there's these e-commerce and SaaS companies, and they need kind of capital to scale. You know, there's debt options, which are risky and they're tying to their business, tying to their personal house, and et cetera. Or there's equity, where like, even if you grow really fast and you're scaling out your competitor, the business might actually still be only worth this much to you because the VC owns the other percentage of the business, right? And so then that's no longer like very valuable to you. So this is where, you know, growth capital short-term capital becomes really valuable. So I talked about juggling credit cards. That's one way that you can kind of untap that relationship between your marketing and inventory dollars and then just reinvesting your profits. You can start to really scale that out and grow. But this is kind of where there's certain revenue sharing solutions that are out there that work on this 4 to 7 month payback term cycle that really allow companies to untap this growth. And that's where Clearbanc sits. So we work on this fixed fee structure. So there's no compound interest. The company always knows what they're going to pay back. So they can be very confident when they take our capital that they know what they're going to have to pay back. And so there's no interest on it. So it's always just going to be this, and it's the amount owed just decreases over time. It's not necessarily the most best graph, but it always goes down. It never goes up, right? It always goes down because you're just paying off the fixed fee that we had before. We also work on this revenue share percentage. So we agree upon a revenue share area. So instead of having this fixed payments where, let's say you take in a situation where you're an e-commerce or a SaaS company, right? And you want to untap that curve that I was talking about before with marketing and inventory. And let's say you take a debt and that debt has fixed interest payments. E-commerce in specific is a very seasonal product. So a very seasonal industry, sorry. So if, in June, you take the capital in March and then, you're doing fine, March, April, but then June comes around, you take a seasonal turn down, you still have that fixed interest payment that the company has to pay back. And this is very scary because the company now has to consolidate their cash to pay this interest payment off, which doesn't help the business, right? Because now they're taking away from maybe other critical functions of their business that they need to really scale and grow, or just to operate, right? And let's say there's another bad seasonal month. Well, they have to reconsolidate cash, move things around, sell off different pieces of the business. It doesn't really work to support the company in the long term. So where we fit in here is we just say, okay, if you're growing fast, then you can pay back a little bit more. If you're not growing and it's going a little bit worse, you can pay back a little bit less. We work on the same revenue share percentage. So we agree upon upfront what that revenue share is going to be. It's very it's in the merchant cash advance space. It's a pretty common thing, but this is kind of like that short-term solution, right? That on a revenue share you can do that short-term and support your company's growth. All right. So we ride the roller coaster with the businesses that we work with. And before I go into this question space, I know that I jumped around a little bit in terms of different sides here. I just wanted to summarize some of the key things that I think are hyper relevant. So, Clearbanc itself fits in this landscape as a short-term solution specifically for marketing and inventory to help companies untap that growth curve and compete in the international market that's out there, right? Now, what we do really well is a data approach that allows us to, take on the barriers of traditional financing and invest in businesses that are actually good. What this allows us to do as a company is have lower rates than a lot of our competitors because we're looking at this data side. Now, our solution is really good in the market for that short-term side. We have partners with Google and Facebook, and so when companies use our capital on these solutions, they can actually reduce the rate of our capital so that it's a lower fee for the companies that we're working with. And so that's what we're really doubling down in as a company, is that space of marketing and inventory, right? With that said, there's other financing solutions out there available that are super relevant for business growth, right? Equity, really good for those long-term scaling out step function improvements where we can help facilitate those interactions. There's also the long-term debt, where if you're looking for new manufacturing equipment or something like an office space or something like that, sometimes debt would be a better case there. We can also facilitate introductions there. But the key thing is that if you're trying to scale and grow your company, the thing that relates the most to that is marketing and inventory. And that's where we can really help as a company itself. So I'll leave it open for questions, Tanya. I'm not sure if you feel like there's certain things that I glossed over that maybe I shouldn't have, that might need more clarification. I do generally love to have like a conversational approach, so I haven't done like an actual presentation in a little bit of time. I'm not sure how how much that showed, but what are your thoughts?
Nothing for me that's like jumps to mind like with that, but I think we've had enough talk that I just don't want to assume that, it's just not coming to mind because we've already spoken
Totally.
quite a bit about this and I already know a lot about Clearbanc. So yeah,
Totally.
we don't have a big, so why don't I just bring on Afsana and Kathy. You guys can
Yeah.
unmute yourselves if you choose to be part of the conversation. Go ahead, keep your cameras turned off if you would like to, whichever, because this will be sent out for people. But this way, maybe again, a little more conversational because it's not a big audience. We had well over 50 people register, but of course, this time of year, not surprising. I didn't even realize it's so close to tax season. So
Totally.
yeah. So anyway, so Kathy and Afsana, you ladies are here. So if there's anything that you wanted to ask, comment on, anything at all, feel free, jump right in. And I would take that as a no.
Yeah. What I will do is, I'll share this presentation with you. I think I already have, Tanya, but I'll share a little updated one that's a little bit more clear as well, and some other references in terms of this. What I want to specifically in terms of the questions, it's cool to ask questions about kind of Clearbanc and what we do as well. But if there's a certain company that you have in mind in a certain situation where you're like, okay, this company's had this trouble here. I've tried to raise money on the VC side. I've worked in certain areas in the financing and banking space. So if you have questions about for e-commerce and SaaS and tech and how that relates, that's where I can really provide extra value.
Okay, so I guess I do have a question.
Yeah, Kathy.
Can you provide a little bit of information about the types of elements or criteria that you would be using?
Totally. So great question. And I didn't really delve into that because I kind of glossed over. I didn't want to bore anyone with more of our background, but I think it's really interesting. We look at 3 different data sources for the companies that we work with. So we're connecting with where they're collecting their revenue. So usually that's through a payment processor like PayPal, Stripe, Square. We're partnered with these companies. We get a view of their top of line revenue. We connect with their store. So like if they're using Amazon or Shopify or Magento, one of those, we can connect with that and see how customers interact with that store itself. And then we also connect with their ad platform. So if they're using Google or Facebook ads or other types of ads, we can connect with that and get a view of how much does it cost for a customer to land on their page. And if you look at that from a top-down perspective, these are kind of the data sources that we're looking at, and they give us a view of how much is a customer worth to the business over a 6-month, 12-month, 2-year time frame. And that's how we provide our investment decisions. So, we're looking very much at these kind of, top line metrics there to be able to provide the revenue metrics there to provide our financing offer. On the back end, we're also doing extra digging in terms of their bank statements and other things like that, in terms of other debt they have available or that they have kind of, in their business, because we don't want to make an investment where there's 40 other debt providers investing in it because it's much more risky. But for us to be able to provide our underwriting decision, it's very much based on those kind of key data sources. Now, there's some restrictions there. We're only investing in companies who are making over 10,000 a monthly revenue. That's just because we actually lose money on those deals, so we need to draw a line somewhere. And that's where we're at now, but we're trying to bring that down further and further as we kind of, improve our own business operations. And then as well, they need to have 6 months of data. So they need to have been operating for at least 6 months for us to be able to confidently say, okay, we have enough data, we can draw this graph out, and we can provide a financing offer based on that. Does that add a little bit more clarity?
It does, definitely. And what about expectations for depth of business plan?
Totally. So we actually don't look at business plan. We're looking very much so just based on, is this business operating well now? And what we'll look at on the business plan side is, we have a dedicated account manager who works with every company who comes through. And so as that company is surfacing, okay, we have a plan to release a new product, or, we're looking to do this, we can help facilitate the introductions to be like, okay, well, you're scaling this much and you don't have an accountant, let's introduce you here. Or, hey, you're scaling out your product and stuff like that. Maybe you haven't thought about your sales tax implications and stuff like that, or maybe you need more capital as you're growing out. But we actually very much so just purely look at how the business is operating now, and we invest on that basis.
So if I understand this correctly, you're only looking at the revenue numbers.
So yeah, we look at the revenue numbers, and they're like bank statements.
So from the bank statements, you're extracting their expenses?
So yeah, what we're doing a quick overlook of their bank statements. We talk about margins with the company, and we're able to look at the margins based on their statements that they have. But we're very much so looking like on a basis of top of line revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. No, thanks for the question.
Rourke, I have a question. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been very, very educational. Thank you very much for a very detailed explanation. So on top of the, I got cut off. So if you said it and I missed it, I apologize for asking again.
No,
but
no
do you look at how viable their business is or potential? Because you just said that you're going to look at their, financial statements and, so is there anything else that you would be looking at before you provide any funding?
No, it's a great question, and it's where we differentiate ourselves a lot, and it's why we can do pretty fast turnaround in terms of our investment. We're very much so looking at, we look at the data on the on how the business is operating now. There are some extra things that we look at in terms of the business being within a certain vertical. So we're able to kind of see, if this business is selling on Amazon in the health and beauty space, because we're connecting with their Amazon account, we can kind of see how do they match up against other Amazon health and beauty companies, and is there a large opportunity for them to grow within that segment?
Yeah, okay.
We do look at data like that, but it's actually not on like a qualitative basis where, we have someone thinking. It's very much on a data perspective. We're modeling this out, and we're using kind of advanced AI to, see what opportunities there are to actually grow.
And this is okay for startups that don't have any like historical record, or they have to be already in business?
Currently, we are only supporting companies who are in business. So we need at least that 6 months of data to be able to see, okay, at least they have a base of operation that we can invest in.
Right.
Currently, that's our base, but we're looking to bring that more downstream continuously.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So no worries at all. As that releases, we love to do big press releases. So you might see something like that where we're bringing that down. But currently it's that 10,000 a month, which is our key criteria.
10,000. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome.
All right. Well, I guess that's it.
Cool. That's a couple good questions. Thank you both.
Yes, and thank you, because people that are rewatching this will definitely be able to benefit from those clarifications as well.
Totally. And if there's any questions that people have while rewatching, or just hearing about this on the side, they can definitely send me an email. My name is weird, but it's Rourke at clearbanc.com. It's ROURKE at Clearbanc, CLEARBANC.com. I think I'll add that to the email or whatever here. And, I'm always open for questions, comments, criticism, everything above. For us, it's, we're this, You know, we know that the financing space is weird, especially for a new economy, and the financing space is shifting to try and address that, right? We're trying to help this new economy out. And there's a bunch of providers out there. We're one that is really good specifically for that marketing and inventory angle, but there are others available out there. You know, it's very much so about like what financing solution should a company be doing if they're looking for maybe long-term investment in this, maybe they're looking to expand internationally, or maybe they're just going in marketing and inventory. It's important to distinguish what the financing is for, and then we can kind of figure out what options are available after.
Yeah, perfect. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that when this goes out by email, if somebody's watching this and received the email, I'll make sure that Rourke, your email address is in there. And then anybody else, maybe actually we can just bring it up, just kind of do a screenshot, because again, this will be basically regurgitated through YouTube. So
Totally.
maybe we could just type it on a screen and just maybe bring that up, that way they can see it. Because you're right, your name is, it's not new to me. You are the second Rourke I have heard of, because I am
It's very rare.
one of my deep dark secrets is, and the other Rourke is Canadian as well, but one of my deep dark secrets is I've been watching Days of Our Lives for, you know, like a gazillion years, probably since I was like grade 3 or grade 4 with my grandmother, which is how I started watching Supernatural that we talked about earlier, because one of the actors went over. But anyway, one of my favorite actors from Days of Our Lives, hasn't been on in about 15 years, but his name is Rourke Critchlow from Calgary.
No way.
So
no
yeah,
way.
so it was, the first two I knew how to pronounce your name immediately. So, but yeah, if we
I was just about to Google it, and then I realized that I had my screen share on. But I'll do that after, because it's rare that I hear another Rourke out there.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we will call it a day. I thank you everybody for coming. And again, I'll put Rourke's contact information out there, and that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank you. It was great. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rourke. Thanks for Sam and Kathy for coming live.
Much, guys.
All right. Thanks.
I love it.
Okay. Thanks, Rourke. Take care.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.